Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Dennis Brown. I want to thank you for joining me. This is my weekly Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. And today we're going to be doing another student success interview, right? Someone who has started as a freight broker recently and is ramping up their sales. We're going to talk a lot about that today. I'm going to introduce him to you in just a minute, but let me just give you a quick rundown. Here's how it's going to work. Hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. I'll try to give some shout outs, maybe at the top here. And then we'll go into the interview. Maybe 20, 30 minutes. We're going to kind of go through his startup journey. The goal here is to obviously inspire you to take some action in your own business and to help you maybe with some lessons learned or to avoid some mistakes, right, along the way. So, and then we're going to jump into live Q&A at the end. My guest and I are going to stick around for a bit. We're going to answer some questions. We'll do our absolute best. We will not get to everybody's question. We will do our absolute best to get to as many as we can in the time allotted. I want to respect his time because he is running a business, right? And a thriving business. So hit me up in the comments with the city and state that you're logging in from. I'll give you some shout outs and then we'll get this show on the road. All right. All right. So we have Ula Madzir from Minsk, Belarus. First guy in the stream is from Belarus. That's amazing. That's pretty cool, right? We have Mark from Springfield, Missouri. We've got Balin from Amarillo, Texas. Kevin Perry from Raleigh, North Carolina. T. Will from Dallas, Texas. He's a first timer. Awesome. Kristen Anderson from Greenville, Texas. So Texas is obviously in the house today. We have Corey from Montana, as always. Thank you for joining me, Corey. And we've got, man, here they come in droves. We got Mirama, welcome. Oksokimi from Seattle, Washington. David Sapita from St. Paul, Minnesota. Zumir Latif from Pakistan. Andrew from Indianapolis, Indiana. Mirama from Michigan. So we got people logging in from all over the place. And again, today we're going to be doing an interview, and kind of the title here, and you'll understand why, is from oil fields to $2 million freight broker. And I'm going to let him explain kind of the context of that when he comes on here. But everybody has a different story of, kind of how they got started in this business, why they got started in this business, their background and all of that. So we're going to talk about that today. That's going to be exciting. For those of you that haven't seen my previous Freight Broker Success interviews, you can always go to my YouTube channel, which I think you can go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/YouTube, and that'll bring you to the channel. And then you can go to the playlist, which is Freight Broker Success Interviews. Okay. So, because we've got, we've got at least a dozen or more interviews on there from past students and from people in the community. Eclectic Rose from Fruita, Colorado. Lorena from Jurupa Valley, California. Everybody's got these complex names today. Socrates 49 from Richmond, Virginia. What about Dennis from Buffalo? That's simple. I like that. Mark. Thank you for the course, Dennis. I'd love an opportunity to do one-on-one if possible. Mark, I don't do one-on-one. I used to do one-on-one. I'll explain to you why. Number one, the one-on-one training was an annual program that I had. It was $30,000 a year. The problem was I had a wait list, but I couldn't help enough people because of my schedule. So I kind of converted everything into either online courses or group programs, of which is my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that after. But yeah, I don't do one-on-one coaching. Just could not help enough people, just too confined time-wise, right? So one more minute and then we're going to get the ball rolling. Got quite a few people live. Isabella from Bronx, New York. But thank you for asking. I appreciate it. And again, I think the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator is probably the program. That's a coaching program, but it's a group coaching program, which in my personal opinion is significantly better than one-on-one. And I can tell you a million reasons why. I've done both as a coach and I've done both as someone who was being coached over the years, right? I've personally spent over $100,000 in personal development and training and coaching personally on myself, right, over the years. So I get it. And I know what I've gotten the most out of. I know what the students have gotten the most out of. And so that's part of the reason why I did it as well. All right, cool. So today we're going to be doing an interview and we're going to talk about the success story, the startup journey. He's still early in his journey, but things are going extremely well. So I'm going to introduce my guest. This is my guest, Cody Miller. Cody, welcome to the stage, my friend. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dennis. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. Now, Cody, give us a quick intro, kind of where you're from, kind of how you got started in the freight brokerage business. Give us a 1 or 2 minute intro into that, and then we'll kind of peel the onion back and pull it apart and see where we can get.
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely. So born and raised in Utah. I am settled down here in eastern Utah right now. It's the Uinta Basin. It's kind of up in the corner of Wyoming and Colorado. And oil field background, supervisor, running around in the field, swinging hammers, turning wrenches, all that good stuff. And orchestrating pipeline maintenance, new construction of facilities, and things of that nature for 10 years. It was really fun. Kind of got a little bit of a dive into the trucking on that category, just lining up, materials coming inbound, outbound, mobilization, demobilization. And we bought up, we have some asset-based or asset trucks in that company, and we were doing some gravel haul material, stuff like that. 2020, COVID hit, and we lost like everything we had going on. We had a lot of guys. We've done layoffs before. In the oil field, it's nothing new. You got your peaks, booms, and drops, right? And we didn't want to just have to lay everybody off this time around. We figured we have the trucks, we got the trailers, let's set them out over the road. So really started out with a lot of hot shots with oil field background, just out there chaining stuff down and trying to keep them busy and running. We had 10 trucks running for 2 years. We were on the asset side, and really having a hard time just holding drivers and getting guys that would take good care of equipment. We had some awesome all-stars, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot. And we were talking with the brokerages we were booking the loads through. We didn't have any direct relationships with shippers. We were like, we got to do something different here. Something's got to change, right? This battle of booking a load every day, trucks, every part of the world, or every part of the nation is getting overwhelming. So started turning the pages and looking at opening up a brokerage. I found you through YouTube and Google search, and figured, all right, this is my guy. I'm going to pick 1 or 2 mentors. You're number 1. I'm going to see what you got to say, follow you, see if we can do this. So watched some of your videos, presented it to the company president, my partner, said, hey, we can do this thing. Let's make it happen. Launched it, got the filed for authority in October of 21, and had our first loads moved in November. Really slow start. I joined on your sales accelerator following the Freight Broker Bootcamp, and really enjoyed the collaborative meetings that we had there. I know you don't do one-on-one, and I really wanted it. But at that time, $30,000 was a heavy investment too, and you weren't offering it. So Sales Accelerator was a huge eye-opener for me. It was massive, man. We locked in our first large contract customer with the training that I gained from you there. And from there, it's pretty much history, right? Like, that's what's given us our real fuel to the fire. Year 1 was interesting. It was really hard, but just to gain them initial customers, and the momentum that we've built has been extremely exciting. I absolutely love what I do every day now. It beats the heck out of turning wrenches.
I love it. So we're going to pull that apart. So you started in the oil fields, right? Mm-hmm. Well, before we dive into this, right? Just so you guys know, I'm going to premise this, and I probably should have done this up front. In just a couple of short years, Cody and his team have built a $2 million plus freight brokerage. Okay. From no experience as a broker, and a little bit of experience in the trucking industry on the asset side, which I'm sure was very helpful. But my first question to you is, and we're gonna kind of talk about that startup a little bit, but what's one thing you learned in the oil fields, right? Because you did that business, you were in that business for 10 years, right? You were entrenched in it. You probably were an expert and knew more than 99% of the people walking down the street. What's one thing you learned in that industry that crossed over into freight brokerage that you think was a big benefit to you?
I think the biggest benefit there, biggest takeaway was really Hey, Shannon, can I give you a call right back? I'm just in the middle of a meeting. (10:04). Okay, give me just one moment and I'll get right back to you. Thank you.
Never ends, right, buddy?
I'm sorry about that. I'll
no worries.
Happen again. Biggest takeaway was the demand of time. The oil field really did train me to be available 24 hours a day. Not necessarily was I the only one that was out there 24 hours, but when you got crews that are working on projects, I mean, 24 hours a day, you got to be ready for inbound calls, you have to be ready for anything to pop up, right? So that was my biggest takeaway that really prepared me for what we're doing now. That, and then obviously, watching the mobilization and demobilization of projects.
Yeah. So you would develop that muscle and that habit of being on demand and being ready at a moment's notice to handle issues and problems. I mean, and for some people, I think that's a little bit of a change of lifestyle when they first come into the business, right? If
Yeah.
you're coming from a normal, 8 to 4, 9 to 5 type lifestyle, where you leave it at the door coming from a W-2 position, that's not what it takes to run any successful business, and definitely not a freight brokerage.
Right.
Right. All right, cool. So you went from the oil fields, and then you guys started running some of your own trucks. Let's have that same sort of lesson from there. Running as an asset-based carrier. How many trucks did you guys have? 5, 10?
So we had 10.
You had 10 trucks.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest lesson you learned there that helped migrate you into the brokerage side? I mean, what's one of those things that just stands out to you?
Yeah, relationships. The battle of booking loads every day and dealing without direct customers, without going directly to the shipper. And we tried. It was just really hard to secure those relationships, and it's possible. Anybody out there running an asset-based trucking company, don't think for a second that you can't build direct relationships with shippers. It's just hard to do, right? But relationships were key. The brokers that we worked with to rebook, they were lifesavers in many different moments. And that was really the takeaway there, and the biggest valuation was those relationships that were dependable, that kept my trucks rolling, that kept my drivers loaded and kept them in a paycheck, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I always preach, and you were part of my sales accelerator, you were part of different programs, and you've been running a brokerage for a while now. I always preach relationships over transactions. The problem in the trucking and logistics and freight brokerage industry is that everybody is so damn transactional, right? It's what have you done for me lately? Where's your truck today? Where's your load today? Everything is so transactional that it ignores the glaringly obvious nuance of relationship, right?
Right.
And when you become very transactional, obviously there's very little loyalty, there's very little retention or recurring business. And so, yeah, I mean, I've said it a million times, and you just said it best, relationships over transactions. That's really one of the keys. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I mean, I think that goes for any business, but I tell you, having been involved in the freight brokerage industry the last 20 years, when I came into the industry, it kind of blew my mind, because that wasn't the way it was in previous businesses. But, I guess that's the good and bad of that. The good is that if you focus on relationships, you'll stand out from the crowd. If you don't, then you'll just be another, freight jockey, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, love it. Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk. When did you start your freight brokerage? What year?
So 2021, October is when we applied for our authority. And kickoff, very end of 21. So really 22 was our first year.
Yeah, you started moving freight about November. 1 year, what was approximately how much was the revenue? What year one?
So year one, 560,000.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
About how much profit roughly? Gross profit?
Profit margin gross was 76,000 that year.
Nice. Okay, cool. Then let's talk about year two.
Year two was just over 2 million.
Nice. So 2 million, and then probably the same margin. What was it? Maybe like 13 to 15%, something like that.
Actually, year two we did pretty darn good, and 14 and a half.
Yeah, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I love it. Well, that's awesome. So tell me about what's your niche? I mean, I probably know this, and the audience might have already inferred this, but what's your niche? What do you focus in on as a freight broker?
Yeah, so I get excited about open deck, heavy haul. I really like RGN, low boys, that type of thing, tilt decks, and that obviously is from my background.
Yeah.
From the oil field background, that's what I was seeing come in and out of locations every day. That's the load securement that I was checking before the trucks departed. So that's where I'm at. That's what gets me excited. That's what I really like. That's my niche. I love it.
As the carrier side, did you have that type of equipment? Did you have that?
We did.
You did. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we first broke out with, was just sending our flatbed trucks over the road, and we had one RGN trailer. And so that's where the heavy haul and, oversized stuff started playing in.
So the customers, are you dealing with customers that are kind of like you were in the oil field business, or have you just kind of opened up to that type of equipment? Hey, if it can go on a flat deck, then, we might be your guy.
Yeah, majority is construction based,
Okay.
not just oil field, but just all construction based is really the niche that we're going after. So agriculture, new development, oil field.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your first customer, right? You came from the oil field asset side where you didn't have any direct customers,
Hmm?
and then you migrated into brokerage. Tell me about your first shipper. How did you get your first load? Give us a quick story about how you got that first shipper load and how you were able to move it.
Yeah, actually LinkedIn outreach. So you've
Mm,
reached hard on the LinkedIn and other social media platforms, right? Them connections to make warm connections rather than just cold outreach.
yep.
I've been hammering on cold connections since when we first applied for the authority. So before it was granted,
Yep.
really trying to get a head start and just speed dialing cold calls, 100 calls a day really was getting me nowhere. A lot of conversations, really short ones, you know. And so LinkedIn was really the key differentiator there. I was able to establish and say, hey, look, I'm a real person and make connections with people first and then do outreach to follow up and see if they had any load opportunities.
So tell me, not specifically, you don't have to disclose who the customer was, but describe to me kind of the transaction. I mean, you sent a connection request and then you called, or did you email them, or give us a little bit of a sequence. I think this is where a lot of new brokers struggle, and even brokers that have been around for a while who haven't really been filling their funnel, and maybe they need to reinitiate some of that sales outreach. Tell me
Yeah,
a little bit more how the cadence went, how the conversation started.
definitely, definitely. So yeah, first things first was a connection request,
Hmm.
personalized message, really just introducing myself and launching it out with, happy to connect, share insights and thoughts, be able to help you out any way that we can. Really just share the knowledge, right? And
Yep.
and then that warm connection, follow up with a phone call, and then a few emails, bounce back to LinkedIn for a message here and there. Make sure to like, comment, share on their material, and really support what they're
Perfect.
doing as a business, right? You want to see them succeed.
Yeah,
Big
of
part of building
course.
relationships is really cheering each other on and offering insight. So then it starts out with a question, hey, could we move this like this? Yeah, absolutely. And then make sure we can solve that up for them, give them a rate, and the rest is pretty much history, just plugging and playing from there.
Yeah. So some of the key things that you guys can take from that. Number one, he didn't just reach out and beat him over the head with his pitch, right? He was a lot more subtle. He took a little bit slower path, right? He slowed things down. He wasn't quite as aggressive. And that's probably the most important lesson that I think you guys can take from using LinkedIn or using any sales outreach, right? Whether that be on the phone or face to face or LinkedIn or email, right? Don't get overly aggressive, but social selling in particular, you got to slow things down, right? So he slowed things down. He built a little bit of rapport. They were able to look at his LinkedIn, profile that had been optimized, and they could see he had a lot of experience in the oil fields and the trucking industry. So that built a lot of credibility, and there was a little bit of back and forth. And then from there, what happened? They reached out to him and said, "Hey, how do we do this or this? Or, hey, are you able to do X, Y, and Z?" And then he responds, and that starts the dialogue, right? And then it's a totally different type of conversation when they're asking you for information versus you always asking them, right?
Right.
So, all right, so you got on the phone, you did the quote, and then tell us how the whole first movement went. I mean, did everything go according to Hoyle? Did you have to scramble? Did you make any money on the load? Did you lose money on the load? Talk to us a little bit about
Yeah, I think we made like $20 on that first one. It
I
might have
love
been
it.
like 25.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a low quote, but got my foot in the door.
Yep.
Everything went smooth as far as on the shipper and receiver's perception, right? The
Yep.
view of it. I actually ended up having a fall off of the truck like an hour before pickup, and I had to slide another one in, which is why the profit margin dropped from, starting out. I was like, okay, we're gonna have a minimum profit margin of $100 on every load, right? 150 at least, but minimum threshold 100. And I had it booked up for like a 175, and an hour before the pickup, the carrier fell through. So pivoted, recovered the load, got a driver to pick up. They're like 5 minutes late, maybe, but they slid in basically right on the appointed time. And yeah, from there, I mean, the shipment went really good. Everything was solid. And because the shipper and the receiver didn't have to deal with that truck fall off and scrambling to recover, they were able to keep their guys on project and on time. And from there, we ended up launching a sustained relationship. We still do business with that customer today.
So you made a very small amount of money on that first shipment, but since then, that's been 2 years now, right? That's been about 2 years now, 2 years now since you've done that. So since then, starting with that first load, making very little money. I mean, how much profit do you think you've generated from that client just based on the recurring services? I mean, guess.
That's a good question. I haven't actually singled out that account for a while, but
Thousands,
I would say
5,000,
probably closer to 40.
40,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what started out, and I want to zero in on this for a minute because this is really important, right? What started out as a very low profit transaction that was based on one load commitment. Okay. They didn't say, hey, we're going to guarantee you 10 loads a week and we're going to pay you all this money. And, we need you to do all this. We just need you to prove you can move this one load. And that one load that he struggled through with some of the issues that took place turned into, over the last couple of years, over $40,000 in profit. Okay. That's how this business works. All right. The hardest part of this whole business is getting that first load. And if you can make it look as easy as Cody made it look on the outside compared to what was actually going on behind the scenes, you get a second load and then you get a third load and then you get a 10th load. And then that's how you build a real relationship. So I love it. Perfect. All right, cool. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your first year, right? Because that was a big learning curve, because I could see you went from 0 to $500,000 and then you went from $500,000 to $2 million. So there was a big jump, right? So you had that learning curve year one. And so what were some of those biggest lessons that you learned year one? Or maybe there were some mistakes that you made and that those made you pivot and make some changes that allow you to grow so rapidly. I mean, what are some of those early lessons?
So developing those relationships, I didn't want to be the pushy, like, used car salesman guy, right? And making the warm connections landed me that first customer, the first load opportunity, and was really pivotal in that moment. That was the breakthrough of, okay, this is how this is going to work, right? Take my time, slow it down. But it was also because I didn't want to seem too pushy. I wasn't really asking for that additional volume. I was more just wanting to continue the friendly relationships and not asking for referrals. That's a big one. Referrals and reviews. It was huge. Starting to ask for referrals and reviews really got me to open up additional doors and increase volumes. Oh, I got a network error. You can still see me, Dennis. I've got you frozen on my side. Network looks good.
Holy moly. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Sorry, you froze up there for a minute. I wasn't sure if it was my network or what was going on.
I have no idea, and I apologize to the audience. Sorry about that. Hopefully you guys can see us now. Hit us up in the comments and let us know you can see us before we continue on. I have no idea what happened. I could have been me. It could have been any number of things. But the question that I was asking you was the biggest lessons that you learned, particularly that first year, that helped you to go from 0 to $500,000, but more importantly, from $500,000 to over $2 million in sales. And you were diving into that a little bit. I apologize.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Yeah. So I was just explaining the fact that a lot of it was I was really keen on the warm relationship build there and the warm outreach and not being too pushy. So I wasn't asking for referrals, which really comes down to a lot of it thinking, okay, this thing isn't structured quite fully enough for me to feel like we're, at this position where we can say, hey, do you have any referrals? Anybody that could use our services? Give me a recommendation. Give me a review if you don't mind. Throw a review on Middle Hawk on LinkedIn. These were the connecting factors that helped us scale the business upward. Was starting to ask and reach out for those referrals and for the reviews, which then in turn led to the questions of basically, how much more freight can you handle? So we were able to secure a lot more volume.
Okay, good. So asking for referrals was kind of that big lesson. I mean, that was really the key. I mean, how many customers did you actually get from that? Was that a key part of how you got new customers?
Yeah, and I would say very large success was owed to that. So my personal book consists of about 15 customers. It's really not overwhelmingly large. I do most of my business with a handful of them, right? Say 6 or 7. But the biggest point was that in doing that, it just encouraged basically the added visibility for, hey, we are seeking more volume, and what we're doing here, we really like it. We like working with you, and we want you to give us a review because we enjoy our partnership and our relations. And then that encourages them to feel like, oh, okay, we're really valued here, and yeah, we have some more projects going on, and we can definitely get linked up. And then those recommendations and those referrals is the fastest way to business success, because you don't have to do that cold introduction of proving yourself. You have somebody that they already know and trust that says, hey, you need to get talking with Cody Miller because he can really help you out on what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you can get referrals, that's like hot knife through butter, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
about as good as it gets when you get a warm referral like that. You mentioned something. Did you get testimonials? Have you spent time with the existing customers and had them do, like, whether it be a video or a written type of testimonial talking about how their experience has been with you? Have you leveraged that at all, or has it just mainly been referrals?
I have a little bit, and we need to do another cycle of that again, or rather a cycle. We need to make sure it's consistent and ongoing. So as the CEO and wearing all the hats of the industry or of the business, we have we have a team put together, right? We have 10 agents. I have an AP. We have a CFO. I have my assistant directly, and we have a company president. But essentially, as a CEO, wearing all the hats and entrepreneur requires a lot of shifting mindset, right? It's my mind's on marketing really strong, and then it's over accounting review,
Yeah.
cash flow. It's a cycle. But
Yep.
what I'm really trying to niche down or buckle down into rather is doing that, the ongoing referrals requests and testimonials. So we've done that in the past, and I really have seen great success with that. And yeah, thanks for putting it back on my mind, because I do need
Yes.
into requesting those again, actually.
Yeah, well, I understand. Obviously, as a new business, you're wearing all the hats, and eventually you're filling in the gaps of the team. You're doing some finance, you're doing some marketing, you're doing some recruiting, you're doing some sales, you're doing a little bit of everything. And that's the stage of every early entrepreneur. And you're kind of filling in the cracks. Eventually you'll get that marketing person, and you'll have other dedicated resources. But I think just stressing to everybody here and just kind of reinforcing what we're talking about now, should be a rule in every one of your companies, whether you're in a new broker or an existing broker, you've been a broker for 20 years. Every single customer that you do business with, you should always attempt to get a customer testimonial, right? Now, you may not be able to get it after the first load. Probably going to have to build some trust with them, build a little bit of rapport with them after you've been doing business with them for several weeks or maybe a couple of months, and things are going well. You got to ask them for a testimonial. Now, if it's a video testimonial, that's perfect. But if it's a written testimonial, just something in writing, whether that be something that came via email or they sent you on LinkedIn or whatever the case may be, you can leverage that testimonial almost as well as you can leverage a referral. Because there's an old saying, right? When someone says it about you, right? When you say it about yourself, it's bragging. But when someone else says it about you, it's proof, right? So yeah, I think that's an important lesson. And sounds like Cody's done a little bit of that, but he's going to do a lot more in the future. So, all right, cool. So where are we at on time here? I'm sorry.
So I'll definitely be increasing that. Thanks for putting it top of mind.
Yeah, what I used to like to do is whenever I would have, you're usually going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 conversations or communications with a prospect. Every time I would talk to them or have a communications, my goal was to drop one new testimonial. And after a while, they were getting a testimonial from ABC, and then they were getting a testimonial from XYZ, and then they were getting a testimonial from 1, 2, 3. And they just kept on getting these different testimonials. And it just made my job so much easier because they were selling for me.
Yeah.
Right. So I didn't have to be quite as aggressive, right? The customers were speaking for me. And that just became a really important part of the methodology for follow-up, right? And it just made, it always made those conversations so much nicer, right? Because we had something cool to talk about. All right, cool. So what's the future hold, Cody, what's the plan here to go from 2 million to 10 million? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, scaling up and putting my agents in place. So this year is really the foundation and marker of us building our the agent model route.
Yep.
So mid-year last year, we hired a handful of agents on. Really, we've had 2 of them that are still with us. So a lot of them didn't end up fitting, or making it work. But this year, the focus is building that agent model out. We have 10 agents currently. We're in the hiring process, and we're really trying to just develop out the teams, like you said, right? I mean, we wear one hat for the start of it all. And as everything comes together, we'll be adding additional AP staff onto our team as well here in the coming months. So it's really scaling up and building the team out, and then the collaboration. So we're doing live team meetings every Tuesday. We get on, we do a live Zoom meet. We talk about what we're up against, the challenges, what we had that week prior, what we're up against that day. We help each other work through, stalemates, if you will, to flip those customers or prospects to being active customers. And that's really going to be the game changer, I believe.
Yeah, I love the fact that you do weekly calls, live calls with your team, and you guys brainstorm on challenges or issues or problems that they're having. I love that. I think that's important. I don't think a lot of people do that. But the agent model is the model you're really looking to pursue to scale, then, primarily agents.
Yes. Yep.
So what type of agents? I mean, obviously you'd love to recruit somebody who has a $5 million book,
Yeah.
and, to come on board, and that may very well happen. But the question is, do you hire new agents who maybe have gotten some training but don't have a book of business? Are you really kind of converting into, hey, we're looking for people who have a small book of business? I mean, what is it that you're looking for? Because this audience is probably full of both.
Right. So last year when we did an initial hiring, mid-year, it was towards, getting closer to Q4, but Q3, we did our initial hiring. And during that round, I was really wanting to, in the oil field, we got straight green hats and we trained them up and we taught them how to go. And that was a huge success for us because we taught them and implemented us with most businesses too, right? You implement the way that your standard operating procedures are. They understand what the requirements are at your company and how things should be handled. And they're not playing that background noise of, well, when I was here, we did this. And so,
right. This is how we've always done it over here. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have this is how we always done it factor playing into it.
Yeah.
We tried that last year with the brokerage agents that we hired on. And like I said, there was just not a big success rate. So pulling on, drivers and things of that nature that have just basically got fresh wind of being a broker, and that didn't really span out. This year, we're really focusing on those agents that are currently in the role, have at least 2 years of experience, primarily 4 or more, and essentially, have a book of business in place or have clients in the industry or, I guess, connections in the industry that they could turn and merge into clients at least. So, a $30,000 book a month is optimum for gross profit, but it's not an absolute requirement. It's not a yes or a no factor, I guess, on whether we'll give them an opportunity.
Yeah. When you're talking about the comparison between the oil field and hiring people green there and training them up versus hiring an agent who's green and training them up, the biggest variable there is the agents are on straight commission, right?
Right.
Whereas your oil field people, I'm assuming, we're getting some sort of salary or hourly rate, right?
Correct.
And so, yeah, so the problem with the agents is, they will run out of runway before they get their customers. The bills will add up faster than their commissions, and then they have to make a decision and go get a job. So
yes,
as you hire a brand new agent into the industry, yeah, it's challenging. But I'll believe it or not, 2 or 3 out of 10, if they were true newbies, probably isn't a bad conversion rate. The challenge is, again, how many experienced agents with a book of business are available to recruit versus how many inexperienced agents that are looking for an opportunity are there available to recruit. So yeah, I get it. Obviously it's kind of a conundrum, right? You've got pros and cons of both sides. But I think, obviously, so your most successful agent now, tell us a little bit about, you don't need to tell us the name or anything, but what are they doing in gross profit? Roughly.
So, I'd have to pull a report to tell you for sure, but they're averaging about 12% margin, and profit, I would say, is probably an equivalent of maybe 10% of what we do overall. But they're really picking up a lot of momentum this year specifically. Last year was more of that ground break threshold, I guess, getting through from working with just one customer and really expanding out. So this year they're expanding their book out. They put a couple of sub agents on underneath them, and now they have freight finders working in that direction. So that's been extremely successful to them to get additional volumes and continue to make new relationships because, if you're just focused on one customer or even a couple, then you're not really getting that additional. So the startup of the outbound and the outreach initially was really strong. And then they got that comfortable seat with dealing with a few customers, the one or two that were doing repeat loads consistently. And really just were sticking to that until the start of this year. And now they've really ramped up to gain additional and continue to build their book out, which has been very successful for them.
Got it. Hey, listen, I just want to cue everybody up. We're going to be doing live Q&A at the end of this, so hang tight. I'm going to ask another question or two, then we're going to wrap up the interview portion of this, but we will be doing live Q&A at the end. We're going to stick on here for a few minutes, do some questions. Last question, right? So you chose the agent model, and that's the model you're going to pursue. And besides the turnover of new agents, kind of the newbies and, that training model of bringing newbies on and trying to ramp them up, other than that lesson of high turnover and kind of pivoting to experienced agents, what's one of the biggest things that you learned about the agent model that you probably didn't know coming in and deciding you were going to launch that model?
It's a good question. I felt like a lot of the kind of battle there, the trench ground has been perceived earlier, right? So I've seen it coming, but including the rollover or the turnover rate as well. And I think the biggest part there that wasn't foreseen was really the acquisition of agents. So how to make Middle Hawk sexy and have people want to join in, right?
Yep.
My mind was so focused on presenting ourselves to potential customers, to prospects, that I wasn't focused on really presenting ourselves to others in the industry that are interested in joining our team, right?
Yeah.
So a big part of that is obviously shifting the focus to make your organization sexy and obtainable without ping pong tables and foosball and beer in the garden, I guess.
Right. No, that's a good point. So you had packaged up your business to sell it to shippers so that you gave a good first impression and that you could service them the way they were looking and needed to be serviced, but you hadn't packaged the business up in a retail package for new agents to come on, right? Whether that be new and experienced agents or newer and inexperienced agents or experienced agents. You just hadn't packaged it up. And that's what you guys have to understand is that, and what I love about what Cody did here is that he didn't go out day one and just start recruiting agents, right? He built his own book of business. He learned how to do the business. He had developed relationships and cash flow that he could reinvest into the business. And then he decided he was going to take the agent model. And what I like about that is he already built a business, right? So, and that business is now something you can package up and customize to agents, because agents are looking for different things than shippers are, right? They're looking for, hey, what's my commission rate? How often do I get paid? What type of insurance do you have? What's your credit like? Do you have a good website? Do you do trainings? How do you support the agents? What's the cost of load boards? All those sorts of things are the questions that agents are going to have. And that's very different. So I love that. I think that's what I would kind of had expected you to say and was hoping you would say, but wasn't sure, your perspective on it, because everybody has a little bit different journey. So,
absolutely.
Hey, listen, Cody, before we leave here, before we end this, let everybody know how they can connect with you. But before we do that, any final words of encouragement or lessons or anything you want to share before we wrap up today?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything is possible, right? Just believe in yourself, keep going. And I'm going to kind of coin this little entry here, but whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. So really put your mind to it and be willing to pivot. When we first started out, my whole goal was to develop all house accounts. and I wasn't going to build the agent model. I wanted to do like nearshore staffing, and just be willing to pivot, really niche down. Dennis, Mr. Brown here is 100% solid on that. The key to success is niching down for that initial growth. And don't be afraid to get out there.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, listen, let everybody know, let every prospective agent know that might be interested in your business, or carriers that might want to work with you. Let them know how they could connect with you, maybe your website, your email, or whatever you want to share, and then we'll wrap it up for today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Middlehawk Transportation, www.middlehawktransportation.com. Look us up, get us on there. You can do submissions for hiring there with our agents. You can do onboarding requests through that website as well. Look me up on LinkedIn. Cody Miller on LinkedIn, I believe, is my straight handle, but I haven't looked at that in a long time. Yeah, Cody Miller on LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. I'm going to be more active on those platforms as time goes on. But feel free to reach out to me and connect on social media platforms. You can find me. I'm either C Miller or Cody Miller.
Perfect. Cody, listen, appreciate you being here, my friend. Thank you so much. Congrats on all your success. It sounds like you're going to have a bang up year this year because sales are continuing to grow based on our earlier conversations.
Absolutely.
Just appreciate you being here. Congrats on all the success. And maybe we'll do a follow-up here in another year or two and see how things are growing and how close you are to hitting that 10 million mark.
Yeah, I love it, Dennis. Thank you. Appreciate you having me. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Listen, hey, hold tight for some Q&A. We're going to do some quick Q&A because I know that he's got some phone calls he's got to return, which, as you know, has to happen in a timely manner. So we're going to kind of skip all the nuance here, and we're going to go right into it. If you have a question for Cody, okay, I really want to kind of give him the opportunity to answer any questions you guys have specifically for him. Feel free to type it in. If it's a question for me, that's great too. But I'm going to try to get Cody out of here in the next 15 minutes, okay, max, okay, so that he can go and do his thing. I want to respect his time. The red light on his voicemail is probably already ticking. He's got a bunch of messages going on, and I can see him looking back and forth. So he's anxious to get back at it. So what questions do you guys have? Okay, here we go. Completed broker side, working on carrier side. Okay, let's see. Let's jump into this. I've completed the broker side of my company, and now I'm working on carrier side. What setup requirements are shared and what needs to be separate? Oof. Okay. Cody, you did this. You want to kind of take a stab at it? If you can give them a couple of tips. I mean, they set up the broker side. They're working on the carrier side. What setups are shared, right?
All right. Let me highlight that again. I'm sorry.
You might be able to
have brokerage in place already, and they're working on adding assets to the brokerage. Is that correct?
Yeah, it sounds like they're now working on the carrier side. What setups are shared? I completed the broker side.
All right. So as far as that goes, we actually ended up separating. We were an asset-based brokerage on the brokerage launch. We actually separated our asset group and the brokerage. So our assets are a completely separate MC.
Yeah.
The reason that we did that is because we ran into speed bump after hurdle after hurdle after flaming loop because of the conflict of non-asset based, like a brokerage, but with assets. It was really hard to get insurance funding. It created a really sticky path. So the biggest thing there was because we couldn't add contingent liability, cargo, and auto into our policy. We couldn't do the additional, 2 million and stuff like that we were trying to add in for contingent coverage for additional assistance to our shippers when that needed to come into play with having the asset group. Aside from that, the asset group insurance also started giving us a lot of back push and wanting to drop policies because we could potentially be overlooking safety or anything like that and tendering those loads out to our asset group directly and making exceptions for, policy concerns and things of that nature with safety.
Yeah, I've heard that many times. So if most of the time it's people that are starting on the asset side and want to launch a brokerage, kind of like Cody did, and they run into some insurance conflicts issues with their insurance company. And then they can also run into some customer issues carrier issues because well, customer and carrier, right? Because of potential double brokering or whatever the case may be. So I always recommend, if you're coming from the asset side, split it out into its own LLC and its own MC. So you have a separate entity, you have separate websites, you have separate addresses
100%.
for them.
Yep.
And then that's going to create, and it does a couple of things. Number one, it solves those two problems that we just talked about. And number three, it creates more flexibility for you. Even though there's a little bit more of accounting cost, you can still share some of the resources across that country, like accounting personnel and things of that nature. But if you ever want to sell off or close one of those businesses, it's a lot easier to kind of have them in separate buckets that way, right? So
100%.
Couple
my
different
recommendation is just a clean separation of the two.
Yep. I agree. Thank you. Where can I find HR documentation and forms specifically for carriers? I have no idea because I never ran a carrier side of the business. Do you have any sense of HR documentation? What did you do with your drivers?
So
you were a small carrier, so it was probably a little less formal.
Yeah, we actually had our HR team was, at the time, it was Paychex is the company we used for payroll, right?
Yeah.
And we reached out to them and had their team create our initial hiring documents. So they were the ones that generated our hiring book that had our all the HR documentation within it. And it was a small price. I don't know what that
That's
was.
an ancillary service. It's a good point. That is a good point. The reason why Paychex and ADP and some of these payroll companies do that is because it's with startups, they don't know where to go for HR, and that's a great starting point. So I agree. I think that would be my advice too. All right. Kristen Anderson asked, what type of shipper processes did you focus on? What were your qualifications for shippers? So when you say what type of shipper process did you focus on? What were your qualifications for shippers?
So I'm guessing that's like target a prospect to build their outreach funnel is what I'm
maybe
assuming.
Yeah.
So you secured this with me actually and helped me from just shooting in the dark all over the place, because that's what I was doing.
Yep.
And you helped me build an ideal customer sheet, right?
Yep.
You give that through your advanced sales course, your sales accelerator.
Yep.
Kristen, if you have an opportunity to join on to Dennis Brown's sales accelerator course, get on it. It's definitely worth it. And build out an ideal customer sheet. That'll include things like what is their industry, obviously. What's their revenue, right? You want to set a revenue goal. So maybe that's somewhere between 1 million and 5 million, or if you're targeting larger customers for major contracts, 10 million to 500 million. I mean, that's a really wide span, but essentially that's kind of how you're going to break it down. Number of employees. You want to go after the ones that have a low employee base, and so they don't have people to be doing carrier compliance and truck sourcing and all of that. That's probably going to be a really good place to start. That helped me out initially. I was like, I want to see the companies that are turning some serious revenue, not quite 500 million on my first shots there, but they have a smaller team, so less than 50 employees, or you can shoot for the larger ones to make sure you can secure large volume contracts. It's kind of up to that though, but build that ideal customer sheet out. Yeah,
we call it our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and it's an exercise we go through and part of the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, because everything kind of stems from that, and we build your sales process based upon that, right? Including what are some of their major challenges, who are the people we're going to be doing outreach to, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's great advice. I think really putting a plan together on who your ideal customer is a great starting point. That's why we start with it in the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. And then that also talks about your qualifications. So I think that answers both your questions, Kirsten. Thank you for asking. Cody, do you think that heavy haul is much more difficult than industrial equipment, like brewery equipment, for example, shipping or refrigerated frozen food transport? Do you think heavy haul is harder than that?
Yes, absolutely. So you got to do route previews, right? Look into the requirements, legal transport for those weights or those dimensions. There are several services online that you can use to make that a lot easier. I like Oversize IO for my first go-to when I'm building out a quote for a customer. It's a great platform to run through there. They have a couple different sizes of plans, whether you're running alone or you have a team. And then obviously I will say that frozen foods and reefer is also a hurdle, but for a whole different reason, right? There's not as much that goes into that though as the oversized heavy haul, obviously.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah. See, the difference here is this, is that, Cody had experience from the asset side running that type of freight, running that type of equipment. He ran flatbeds, he ran RGNs, he ran that type of stuff. He had experience in the oil fields even before he was doing it on his own trucks, with seeing carriers and suppliers and providers bring in and, transport that stuff. So he had a lot of hands-on experience with that stuff for 10 years. So it was a logical progression from him. My advice is, unless you have some experience with that, don't make that your first niche. Okay. I wouldn't necessarily, if you're a brand new broker, make that your first niche. And the reason why is because there's a level of complexity to it and there's a level of risk to it for someone that's brand new that, I just don't think it's the best place to start. And I agree with him. I think the level of complexity in heavy haul and over-dimensional stuff it far exceeds even refrigerated. Again, there's a much smaller number of issues that can go wrong with a refrigerated load. In most cases, it really has two things, right? Was it the right temperature or wasn't it the right temperature, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Obviously with produce, you can't mix different types of produces because of gases and, and reactions and stuff like that. But yeah, I agree with him. I think it is more complex. If you're brand new and don't have experience, I would kind of shy away from it. But maybe you just start in flatbed, right? And that becomes your entry, because you can just do straight flatbed loads, which is a lot easier and very different than doing over-dimensional heavy haul stuff. So
if over-dimensional and heavy haul is something that excites you for the future, start out with flatbed loads, run legal loads, really pay attention to driver securement and talk with the flatbed drivers as you're booking them out. Once again, relationships are key. Relationships over transactions, but get those drivers on the phone, spend the time talking to them, ask them about if they've done oversized hauling before, pick their brains. At nighttime after you're done with your 6 to 7 or 6 to 10 or whatever your timing running is. I'm 24/7, 7 days a week, but when you're done with your main workflow, reach back out and just touch base with those drivers that you've connected with and really pick their brain on if they've done heavy haul and get some experience there through the grapevine.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you'll be building your carrier base along the way, because a lot of the same carriers that run flatbeds will also run RGNs and low decks and all that stuff. So you'll be building those relationships with the carriers at the same time while you're building your knowledge. So good question. Question. What's the commission rate for fresh agents or freight finders? What do you charge? What do you pay agents, or what is kind of the going rate for agents that are maybe new to the industry from your experience?
Yeah. So entry-level agents, from my experience, start out around 55%. The commission scale there will run between 50 and 70% for most agencies.
Yep.
And we pretty much follow that model as well. We start our agents at 55%. As they reach, we have a bonus incentive plan that really encourages them to make their scale and step up their volumes. While they're building relationships and scaling their volumes up, when they hit those bonus marks, we also up their percentages to fit what their goals are.
What about, you said that some of your agents had sub-agents and freight finders. Kind of what's been the model there? I mean, you may not have hired freight finders, but what are you seeing there in that freight finders concept?
Yeah, so on that freight finder concept, they're getting a split of the commission from the shippers that are merged over. So essentially, if they can make warm leads out of cold outreach, right? If they can do that cold outreach to make warm leads and warm prospects, and then whether that's a collaborative effort to flip that customer into being someone who you're getting freight from and actually doing load movement, or whether that freight finder secures the load themselves, and then obviously that converts the customer directly if they give them a first opportunity. But then they're paid off of that account a percentage. So, and that percentage ranges depending on, because it's 1099 based. So really, if you're running a sub agency, your own independent agency underneath our brokerage, then you're your own boss, and we're just here to assist you and make sure that you succeed. So it's up to you on what you feel that freight finder is worth, depending on their output. I usually recommend somewhere around a 10%, but that's obviously just a recommendation. We don't have a requirement for the sub agent pay. Some are more, some are less.
Yeah. So the agents get a portion of the brokerage commission. So let's say there was $100 that was generated in profit. And let's say for easy math, the agent got $50 of that because they got 50% commission. On that 50%, on that $50, the sub or the freight finder might get something along the lines of 10 or 20% of that, which would mean they would make $5 to $10 per load. Is that correct? So that's kind of the general math, right? Of the freight broker to the freight agent to the freight finder, right? Or sub agents a little bit different, right? They would get a little bit higher commission. A freight finder is kind of someone who does exactly that. They're just developing the accounts and then they're handing them off to an agent, and then that agent's kind of handling it from there. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, it's an interesting concept. All right. And we got one last question and then we're going to let Cody go. Let's see. Where do we go? Where do I go? Do I still present the carrier cargo insurance to the shipper if I already have contingent cargo? All right. So here's a question. Do I still present the carrier cargo insurance to the shipper if I already have contingent cargo, or do I present both carrier and broker insurance to the shipper? Let me start with this. First of all, I never submitted carrier insurance to a shipper.
Only if there was a claim.
Only if there was ever a claim on the back end. So as a broker, you are part of your responsibility, right? As a broker is to validate that the carrier has the proper insurance coverage, both BIPD and cargo.
Yes.
But you're not going to send that insurance to your shipper. The only thing you're going to send to the shipper are your credentials, right? So they're trusting you that you're already vetting these carriers. Right now, when the carrier comes into their dock, they could always write the carrier's name down. They could always look up the insurance. There's things they could do if they wanted to, but I've never had, I'm not going to say never. I think I did have one customer that used to ask us to do that. Can you send us the carrier insurance? And we just told them, listen, that's not how we operate. Because carriers change and they can change on a dime, right? We might have a carrier that's booked to pick up your load in an hour, and then that carrier falls through, and then we got to have another carrier come pick it up. So here's what you have to trust. You have to trust that I'm vetting and doing that. I'm working with carriers that I have relationships that I've vetted that have the proper coverage, or we can't, right? The liability is on me to make sure I do have that, because if I don't have that, say for example, there's a load worth $100,000 and it's a total loss, but the carrier's only got $50,000 in coverage. I am now negligently liable for that $50,000 delta.
Yep.
All I have to make sure is that they had $100,000 coverage that would cover that freight. If I do that, my liability is now gone. Okay. Yep. It will then fall on the carrier's insurance. You don't want to accept liability as a carrier when you're operating as a broker. Anything you want to add to that?
No, just 100% exactly what you said. I mean, that's straightforward, and there's just cut and dry right there. It's 100%.
Cody, thank you so much. I'm not going to take any more of your time. I'll funnel through some of the rest of these questions. I really appreciate you being here. Super excited for you. Thank you for the kind words about Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. I appreciate it. And we'll see you online, and keep us posted how things are going.
Absolutely.
All right, man. I'm going to hit the rest of these questions. You can sign off.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate you today.
Thanks, Cody.
You bet.
All right, guys, I'm going to run through some of the rest of these questions. Okay. M. Smith says, did you get involved in requests for proposals, RFPs, bidding on freight? I can't answer for Cody, obviously, and I apologize. He couldn't stay any longer, but we'd held him for a long time and he had a lot of things going on. I promised him we wouldn't go more than an hour. So, RFPs can work, okay, as a broker. But RFPs are typically year-long commitments, year-long bids, right? And so it's very hard for brokers. It's very hard for anybody, asset-based or brokers, to submit freight quote rates for a year out. Where most brokers do well is in the spot market. In the spot market is something you can't predict what the spot market's going to be 60, 90, 180 days from now. So while larger shippers do these RFPs, and you may be able to, work your way into opportunities there, I would be cautious, especially if you're brand new. If you're brand new, I think you need to be focusing on smaller companies and you need to be focusing in the spot market. As you get more sophisticated, as you get more experience, as you get more legs under you, then that's when I would think you would probably move into a little bit more of the RFP mode. So hope that helps. Kristen asks, how do you deal with shippers that give you a list of loads to bid on? The competition of the bidding against other brokers is difficult. How do you get shippers that would give you dedicated lanes? Okay. So Kristen, I think what you're talking about is load lists, where they send out a load list and then you try to cover that load. And then, maybe they, maybe I'm wrong, but if they're sending out a load list and they're saying, here's the loads that are available for today, cover it and contact this type deal. And maybe they even have their rates that they're willing to pay on it. I don't play that game. I call that jump ball freight. It's a waste of time, because 9 out of 10 times, even if you cover the load, by the time you contact them back, it will have already been covered. Okay. So I don't play the jump ball freight game. I recommend you don't play the jump ball freight game. I recommend you take that time and energy and resources that you're jumping for that ball and chasing your tail, and you dedicate it into prospecting and finding customers with dedicated lanes. And the way you do that is you got to filter through, right? You're going to have some companies that are going to want to send you a load list, and you're going to have some companies that are willing to give you dedicated freight. But here's what I would always do. I never worked on the load list, but I would tell all the guys on the load list, listen, unfortunately, we're not able to operate that way, but I do see a few lanes on here that if we became dedicated, I could give you better pricing and overall better service. So why don't we carve out just these couple of lanes, and I'll work on those, and every time you have that lane, just send it to me, and you know that it's going to be taken care of. You're not going to have to worry about if and who and when and is it going to be covered, because I'm going to take it off your plate, right? So that's how you become dedicated if they're trying to do these load lists. Other than that, that's just how you bid on the freight, right? You bid on the freight. If they say, all right, well, we accept the rate, great, we got a load for you. As long as it's a dedicated lane, as long as it's a dedicated load, it may not be a dedicated lane, but it may be a dedicated load. So they may be running 20 loads a week in that lane, but you might only be getting 2 or 3 of those loads, which is fine. You don't need to be dedicated on every load. You just need to get dedicated freight. When it comes to you, there's no other brokers that are competing for it. There's no other brokers that are trying to cover it. Okay. That's jump ball freight, and we don't waste our time on that. Okay. This might be unrelated to today's subject, but I might ask as well. I need to reinstate you meant surety bond, but the quote that I got is ridiculous. Have the rates gone up? The rates have gone up for surety bonds. The reason being is because last year you had a lot of brokerages that either canceled their surety bond, went out of business, or had or had a lot of carrier claims, because carriers went out of business, shippers went out of business, brokers went out of business, and we had that big downturn. The market is now leveled off and is going to start heading back up, but the insurance company has adjusted their rates. So whereas you might have been able to, if you had good credit, and you might have been able to get your freight broker bond, a $75,000 bond for $1,000, and you got good credit now, that might have went up to $1,500. If you don't have good credit, it might be $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, depending, right? So I'm not sure, a lot of it depends upon your personal credit, right? So they're going to look at that personal credit score as a major indicator as to what your rate is going to be. Here's what I would recommend. If you are looking for a bond, we have a preferred vendor. They've helped hundreds of our students. You can go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/bond, fill out the application. They'll contact you. They will know that you're from Freight Broker Bootcamp. They will go out of their way to try to help you, because we have referred them so many students over the years. They've done a great job. They're probably the largest freight broker bond provider in the country, right? And so, we've had a long-term relationship with them. I would highly recommend anybody who is looking for a bond or is shopping their bond. Maybe they think their rate's too high and they want to get a comparative quote. Go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/bond, and that's the best place where you could go. Thanks for the question. Ricky, you can catch it on replay. Okay. So this is replayable. Plus, on YouTube, I will re-release an edited down version of this later in the week, okay? So listen, thank you guys so much for being here. Listen, let me ask you a question before we go. Do you like this interview format? Do you like the interview format where I bring in past students, I bring in other freight brokers to tell their startup story and some of the lessons they've learned? You know, the things that we talked about on this live was different than a lot of the other interviews that I've done. If you like this, give me a rating from 1 to 10. 1 meaning, Dennis, I hated this format. 10 meaning I'd love to see more of these types of interviews. Hit me up in the comments and let me know. Love to hear from you. Any other questions you have, type them in the comments. I'll try to come back in the coming weeks and try to answer those questions. And worst case scenario, come back every Monday at noon where I do these live trainings and live interviews every week. Let me see if I can get a little feedback from you guys on if this sort of stuff is valuable. All right, cool. Yes, 10, thumbs up. 6 or 7 out of 10. Okay, so you're not crazy about the interviews. Okay. So Ula Mazir, do you prefer the training then? You prefer when I pick a topic and just kind of train on it? I would assume you probably prefer that over the interviews then. Socrates 10. Need to find out more about access to the spot market. Okay. Yeah, I love the interview. I like doing both. I love the training where I'll come in and I'll kind of pull apart a specific topic or, you know, or a strategy or a tactic of some sort. But I also like the interviews. And the reason being is because, number one, I get sick of hearing myself talk. Number two, you probably get sick of hearing me talk. And number three, hearing from somebody who's live freight brokering, who just started their freight brokerage in the last 6, 12, 18, 24 months, which is typically the students that I bring on. You know, you get a little bit different perspective from them, right? And I think you're able to ask them directly, ask them questions, which I think is also helpful. Plus, we end up making a lot of connections on the back end. So if you're interested in becoming an agent, right, you know how to reach out to Cody, right? If you're a carrier who's interested in working with a growing brokerage, you know how to reach out to Cody and vice versa. So I think it makes a lot of connections there as well. So, all right, guys, listen, thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for the feedback. Put a reminder in your phone every Monday at noon for the Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. If you're on my email list, check the email. If you're not, listen, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent and you're just getting started, maybe this is your first live, or maybe you're trying to piece the information together, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students, had that program for over a decade, and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. That's my startup program. Now, you heard Cody talk about my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. That is my Freight Broker Sales Coaching Program, where I take that piece of my brain, everything about Freight Broker sales strategies, tactics, tools, my entire system that allowed me to do over $200 million as a freight broker. And that is sold out. It's closed. You can't enroll in it right now, but you can get on the wait list. And if you get on the wait list, you'll be the first to get notified when spots open up and we start enrollment again. Okay. So you got to get on the wait list. And that it's absolutely free to get on the wait list. The program is not free. It's not cheap, but it's worth every dime plus. Okay. You heard Cody talk about it, you know, from his experience and how it helped him and how it helped him generate a significant amount of revenue for his business that he wouldn't have had if he didn't invest in that program. So highly recommend you guys get on the wait list. You can do that at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. Appreciate you guys being here. Have an awesome day, an awesome week, and we'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.